Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Northwood Podcast. I'm your host, Heath Jones, and I find myself in a bit of a hurry today, recording this in between tasks and places to be. So I'll move quickly through this introduction so we can get to the meat of the message, which is a little shorter this week than other weeks for the same reasons. I'll take this moment to give a shout out to the All Indiana Podcast Network as they distribute and produce the Northwood Podcast. We're very grateful for all that they do. If you'd like to find out more about them and the podcast they offer, I'd encourage you to check out their website at www.wishtv.com/podcasts. And if you're wanting to know more about the Northwood Podcast and the church connected to it, Northwood Christian Church, the church that I pastor, then please reach out to me. Directly would be the best way. We have a website you can check out by Googling our name and typing in the word Indianapolis so you find the right church, Northwood Christian Church. But the best way is to reach me directly through my email, which is heath@ndncc.org. That's Heath, my name, at ndncc.org. And I'd love to hear from you. Lastly, if you're listening to this podcast and you enjoy this podcast, please share it with a friend. Promote it on your social media feeds. This helps and goes a long way to getting the word out. And if you're watching this on YouTube, just give this video a thumbs up or give it a comment. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Or if you're listening to this as a podcast on whatever app, please follow, like, or subscribe to the Northwood Podcast. And whatever you do, please leave a comment. I'd love to hear a suggestion or a word of encouragement. Sometimes a little kindness goes a long way. In other news, here in a moment, we're going to be going over a Bible passage found in Matthew chapter 6. But first, we need to pause for an ad break for our podcast audience. So if this means you, we'll catch you after these ads. And we're back. Or maybe you didn't leave. Either way, let's proceed with the reading of Matthew chapter 6, verses 22 through 24. Gospel of Matthew chapter 6, verses 22 through 24. And they read, "The eye is the lamp of the body. Therefore, if your eye is healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light in you is darkness, how terrible will that darkness be? No one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you will be loyal to the one and have contempt for the other. You cannot serve God and wealth." This passage comes from Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, and that sermon is thought of as a near synthesis of Jesus' teachings, or at least as near a synthesis as you'll find. It's one of the more memorable moments in all the Gospels. And the sermon comprises all of chapters 5, 6, and 7 of Matthew's Gospel. We are smack dab in the middle of it in chapter 6. And in this speech, we encounter quite a lot that you should recognize. The saying, "Judge not, lest ye be judged." That's there. And don't note the speck in your neighbor's eye while ignoring the log in your own. A word against hypocrisy, very popular saying, also found in this same sermon. The Sermon on the Mount gives us the Lord's Prayer, where Jesus teaches us to pray, "Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be your name." That's in this very chapter that we're studying today. That passage that you may have heard about how we need not worry, for the same God who attends to the birds of the air will account for us. That's also from this sermon, and we'll talk more about that next week. The Golden Rule, as the last for instance here, "Do unto others as you'd have them do unto you." All of this in the same sermon that we found today's text. And I find it strange that so much of this sermon is lauded and praised, quoted and requoted. You know, Jesus' greatest hits, most memorable lines. But I bet there are a far fewer number of favorite Bible verses that come from this chapter, chapter 6, because interwoven through these teachings that we hold and appreciate, in chapter 6 we find held up as wisdom teachings about money and possessions that can probably make many of us feel uncomfortable. What I mean is, while people generally accept and appreciate the golden rule, we are less eager to wrestle with these passages that call to question our relationship with wealth and possessions. Because frankly, our wealth and possessions have their hooks in us. It can be like talking about a piece of ourselves. But Jesus included these teachings about wealth and money in this sermon, right alongside other more quotable passages, like the Beatitudes. Blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are the meek. Blessed are the humble. You've heard that before too, probably. But these passages about money and possessions right alongside those, which implies that Jesus believed that his teachings on money were vitally important for us to hear. But through this read-through, something else struck me. I was struck by the sheer amount of airtime that Jesus gives in his sermon, his most famous sermon, to this topic of wealth and possessions. In the speech, he covers a variety of topics, from fasting to prayer to how to handle one's enemies. They run the gambit. But talk of money and possessions comes up a whole lot in comparison to some of these other topics. It comprises most of the 6th chapter of Matthew, as I think I've alluded to already. But in total, there are 111 verses in the Sermon of the Mount. And of those verses, 19 of them have to do with money and possessions. I just ran the numbers. I did basic division. That comes to 17% of the sermon. So very nearly 1/5 of these teachings that we believe to be central to our faith, 1/5 of them is about money and possessions. So I'm going to assume that these teachings are good for you and me and important, and that we need to be challenged by them, as I hope that we have been in these past 2 weeks. We are in the 3rd week of our stewardship drive. It's that time of year when we make appeals at our church, to our church and its members, to consider how they may support our church financially. And our theme has been more than maintenance. And I named it this because I, your pastor, would like to see our church do more than pay the bills. This is hyperbole here. We do more than pay the bills, but it's a lot of what we do, as do many other churches, with these buildings to keep up and the heat on and the lights and all of those things. It's not very inspiring, and it's not, frankly, what we're called here to do, so we want to do more. But to get there, our hearts will need to be in an appropriate relation to our wealth and possessions, which is why we're inviting Jesus' sermon into our community to challenge us in these directions. Today's text begins with some sayings about our eyes and what they may reflect. More accurately, what they may project. For you see, the ancients believed that from your eyes you emitted your light, your life's essence. They thought that you could look in the light in another's eyes, and there you could catch a glimpse of who they were fundamentally on the inside. So the eyes were thought of as lamps that projected out the light or the darkness of the viewer. What comes from inside, from the human heart, comes out through the eyes is the idea. So one might be said to have bright eyes, indicating that what comes out is pure. The gaze is set on the right things. Or you may have heard it said that one's eyes may darken, that this is to imply that danger and evil may lurk within, as those eyes are set to evil tasks. All this to say, the light we project reveals who we are. You will then project that light that emits from your eyes onto pursuits and desires in life. You could perhaps think of your eyes as headlamps that shine on what you value and pursue. Who you are is revealed by what catches your eye, what holds your attention. So what catches the eye? I do remember this passage being preached, or passages like it that have to do with eyes and keeping your eyes pure. Growing up in church, I remember sermons on these topics, perhaps on these very verses that we read, the first two that I read before the one about serving money or God. And these verses have to do with the eyes, sight, light, and what this reveals. But if your eye is unhealthy, your whole body will be full of darkness, as it says. But I was told that these passages meant that I was to keep my eyes from viewing impure things. I still think it means that. But by impure things, they meant sensual things, sex and stuff like that. They thought that these verses about our sight and the light in our eyes and about what this reveals about us were trying to warn us away from looking at dirty pictures. Now, I'm not suggesting that you should do that. But what I am saying is this is not what these verses are about. Sexual desire, sensual desire, those things. These verses are about wealth and material possessions. When people preach these verses along other lines, they're pulling them out of the context that we find them in. Taken into context, sandwiched between two passages about the allures of wealth and warning us about those things, these verses are meant then to ward our eyes away from greed. To ward our sight away from greed and material wealth when those things have captivated our attention. Jesus did not say these things to assuage our sexual desires one way or the other. He commented on those matters in other places. But these words about the light in our eyes and onto which it shines are meant to warn us of the allures of material wealth. And this being the case, what comes before and what follows makes far more sense. Without keeping that in our focus, it just seems like these are two verses dropped in out of context, but they are about greed. For immediately after these words about the light and dark in our eyes, Jesus elevates the risks far higher, keeping the topic on the warning he's giving about material wealth. He says that, quoting him, "No one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you will be loyal to the one and have contempt for the other. You cannot serve God and wealth." In other words, with your spiritual eyes, you are not like a chameleon that can look both directions in different ways. You can look one direction, your eyes fixed on the prize and what you prize. And here Jesus gives wealth a personified quality. He refers to wealth as a potential master to which one may answer to as one would a deity. Jesus knows that money holds this place in many human hearts, the primary place. Many pursue wealth and material comfort above all other concerns. For many, it's all they know to live for. And as a result, look at the world. Disaster, hungry people all over the globe, violence committed against other humans in pursuit of land and resources. The planet is covered with individuals who are pursuing material gain as if it were to be our guiding principle, their eyes fixed on that. The result, so long as our eyes are fixed on these things, the ways by which we can acquire money, goods, and material comfort, we will ignore what really matters. What catches our eye and our focus, our attention, matters. What we notice and pursue matters. So the question for us today is, what catches our eye? To what do we affix our focus, and what does this tell us about ourselves? Well, I can speak for myself. Much of my attention on the day-to-day is spent on the trivial. Perhaps you relate. Other times, my focus is on diversions and distractions from life's struggles. Think entertainment, television, video games, and anything else sold to siphon off our dollars while captivating our attention. So maybe you join me in those struggles, but many of those who produce our art and entertainment, or who pay for the ad breaks that bracket our televised programming, many of them, maybe most of them, have their eyes fixed solely on monetary gain, on profit. Could it be that their God is money? Could it be that our collective God is money? Well, let's look at what our culture casts its gaze on, fixes its attention on. If our culture has eyes by which it sees, to what do we mostly fix our gaze? This is very nearly a rhetorical question, because I think that by now we all understand that ours is a culture that will pursue wealth and comfort at nearly any cost. We have shown this to be true by our actions as a civilization. Even as the planet heats up, even as others work in unfair and unsafe working conditions to produce and distribute the products that we buy for ourselves, our eyes are taking Jesus' standard here, full of darkness, and we fix our gazes on the wrong objects as a culture. Good people in the culture, but collectively cascading into the wrong direction. And when our eyes are filled with darkness in this metaphorical sense that Jesus is here describing, we are so captivated by these goals that we will do just about anything to attain them. You don't believe me? Right now, every day, in the news you see, read, hear about people who will kill to gain or to keep material goods, land, resources, etc. One would think that these killings could be thought of as sacrifices to the god wealth. People destroy relationships to gain or to keep material goods, again, sacrificing love on the altar of the god of wealth. In contrast, when humans pursue the realm of God that Jesus talked about, people are placed over profit. When humans pursue the realm of God, fighting or killing over land or riches makes no sense, as we discover that none of it was ever worth fighting or dying for, but was rather a gift given us by God to share. When humans pursue the realm of God, the needs of our communities are met as the generosity of its citizens prompt the acts of charity and altruistic cooperation that can cause a civilization to thrive in all of the right ways. Its participants fed, housed, and cared for in every important respect. Just about 10 verses later, in this same sermon, in verses we'll consider next week, Jesus said that we should pursue first the realm of God, and that all these things will be added unto you, to us. And all these things that Jesus is talking about, all these things he is talking about here, is all that one needs to live well and happily in community with others. Because that's basically what drives the realm of God. That is the goal, the end. So Jesus implores us to pursue the realm of God before all other interests. So let's bring this talk back in-house. Let's make it about our churches, specifically in the 21st century. Let's bring it from more than 2,000 years back to our present time, where we have this ancient message and wisdom that we've received from Christ that the world desperately needs to not only hear, but to see play out in the real world. It's because we have here at the heart of our faith traditions as Christians, teachings about wealth and money that could save the world if they caught on. If Jesus' teachings were followed, the problems that face us in this immediate moment of fear and division and hatred and violence, and if not solved, these problems would be greatly reduced if our world leaders on all sides of every conflict sought first the realm of God, if our titans of finance, if those in positions of influence and power could catch the fire, if our culture were better shaped by the teachings of Jesus, our alleged Christian nation, as opposed to the guiding principles of our consumer-based economy, then the whole world around us would be different, completely different, and in all the good ways. And then here we are, the church, with all these teachings. Here's this pastor preaching on these things, an important answer for these times, and we need to let the world know, but we need to do more than talk about it. We need to live into it. We need to live into the words of the one who told us to serve God instead of wealth. And the world might be remade. Who knows? So during this season of the life of our church, we've provided pointed opportunities for you to exercise your spiritual muscles, to redirect your gaze away from material pursuits and onto the realm of God. And one of the ways that we may train our eyes to seek out the better things is to let go of what distracts us. And if this means letting go of some of our possessions, as I suspect it will for many of us, then consider giving what you have to various charities and causes that help to change the world in the ways Jesus wants to. Another way is for you to get involved in this work. Instead of using your valuable time to pursue diversions and distractions, use some of your time to help us build a better world. Join a church that is doing good work. Hint, hint, Northwood. Or if not Northwood, some other church or group that is finding ways to redirect our culture's wealth to the places where it is needed the most, to hungry mouths and homeless bodies. At our church, we are committed to this better way. We are trying to fix our gaze on what matters so that the light of God that shines inside of us may illuminate the world. We hope that you may join us in this good work Or if not, join us, join others, where you are to do good work. If joining us interests you, please reach out. But to conclude, I think that one practical question for us to take away here, to try to answer in the time after this little talk is, to what do we fix our gaze? Our bright eyes, or are they darkened by the ways they are captivated by what they should not be captivated by? What captivates our attention and therefore our hearts? And chances are our hearts are torn between the gods of money and the God Jesus calls us to serve. And in the moments that followed this little talk, I encourage you to take some time to ask God to give you the grace and the courage to reject the pursuit of wealth, so that you may serve God with your whole and undivided heart, your eyes shining brightly and fixed onto what matters most, on loving God and on loving others.